Hi, my name is Bobby Seagull. I matriculated in 2003. I'm a mathematician. Currently, I'm a part-time school maths teacher, but actually I was a captain of the other university, Emmanuel College in Cambridge, for Universe Challenge a few years back. And since then, I've gone on to become an author of books about maths and quiz books. I'm a presenter for the BBC series Monkman and Seagull's Genius Guides, actually the co-brain of a new Channel 4 quiz show, The Answer Trap. So maths teacher, but I love numbers.
My name's George. I am currently in my second year to study maths at LMH. So I matriculated in 2019. What did you love most about your time at LMH as a student?
Yeah, so to understand that question, I think it's a question of why did I pick LMH? Again, you're looking at the prospectuses and you're wondering in the open days. I think one thing that appealed to me about the college is it wasn't right smack bang in the centre of Oxford, because Oxford city centre can be really busy and overwhelming. So I wanted a college that wasn't right in the centre. But then I looked around at other colleges around the edge of Oxford, and I loved the sort of friendliness and tranquility of LMH. It felt like, okay, we're not that far cycling into town, but you feel like you're in a different world. So I love that sort of friendliness, that calmness, and that peace that the college brings you being away from the city centre. So I think it's just that it's such a laid back, down to earth college. And do you find it reflects still to this day? Like as a student now, what's your experience? Obviously, COVID has made the experience a bit different, but from your experience, what's it like being at LMH as a student now?
Yeah, so obviously it's really different at the moment because of COVID with all the online teaching, but obviously in first year, it was just a normal term at the start. And I liked LMH. I picked it for the same reason as you, because it was sort of outside the city. Because I remember going to my open day and also at my interview, I had 2 interviews at LMH and then one at Trinity College. And I remember having to try and sort of weave my way through a crowd of tourists to get into my interview. And that sort of really put me off the central colleges. So I'm grateful that LMH is sort of outside. I love the fact that it's right by university parks as well, and the grounds it has.
I used to go jogging around there quite as well. So do you have like a particular place in LMH or Oxford that you really think, oh, that's my place, that's the place I love being?
To be fair, I would say the parks, just because sort of I usually, during normal term time when I'm in college, I tend to try and go for a walk around the park almost every day. Even like if I'm stuck on a math problem, I find it really easy to just go for a walk, clear my head, and then come back to it later. And also sort of going jogging in the mornings around the parks. It's really beautiful and the river's nice. Do you have a favorite place? Or?
So the thing is, in LMH itself, I like our backs, overlooking the river where we've got our own punt. Just again, it feels like a different world away. I love that. In Oxford itself, this probably relies sort of on my sweet tooth, but I love G&Ds. Ice cream place. And in fact, every time I come back to Oxford, on the way back, as a treat, I'll always get a G&D. So for me, it's a combination of the calmness of the backs at LMH with the G&Ds.
Yeah.
So they're definitely...
the back of college is really nice. Last term I was in college, so in Michaelmas term, when it gets dark, because Oxford is sort of away from any bright lights of cities, you can really see the stars, especially at the bottom of the gardens. And it was nice to just sort of take a walk down at night time and just look up at the sky on a clear day.
What drew you to doing maths at university?
Well, I've always loved maths. It's sort of always been something I've been interested in and enjoyed doing. When I was looking at degrees, I looked at several different subjects, but I was always drawn to things that had with maths or and maths at the end of it. So in the end, I just decided, why would I look at other degrees and not just do the maths degree itself? I guess the thing I really like about it is it's just one big problem to solve. I've always loved different types of puzzles and problem solving. In my free time, I do logic puzzles. I always used to do cryptography in school as well. And I feel like math is to me, it's just one big logic puzzle. And I just enjoy trying to solve hard problems, I guess. Also, it's useful, but that's sort of an afterthought to me.
Yeah, the utility. Yeah, I think that intrinsic enjoyment has to be there first, and then you're like, oh, there is actual real utility.
Yeah,
Because there is utility in mathematics, but I think you need to derive pleasure from that. You know, when you're working on a problem, you're like, ah, finally got it, I got it, I got it. And then you're like furiously writing away because you've worked out the method. I think that's got to be the joy of
yeah.
mathematics.
That sort of eureka moment sometimes comes at weird times as well. I had it last year where I was stuck on a problem and I was thinking about it and thinking about it. And I gave up and went to sleep. And when I woke up in the morning, I just suddenly thought of the answer and scrawled it down before I'd even gotten out of bed.
That honestly, that's as a mathematician, even now as a math teacher, when I help students, that's the best bit when students or people come back and say, oh, you know, I was on the bus and I was running late for it, and then suddenly it came to me, this problem of momentum. So I think it's, yeah, it's just those, I think very few subjects have that same eureka moment. I'm trying to think, like maybe the sciences, maybe some physics, but maths is the purest of that, where you really can sort of almost like sit and soak up that, like, aha, I've worked it out.
Yeah, and it's also the feeling when you're studying something difficult and it all just clicks into place and it starts to make sense.
Oh, I was gonna ask, like, do you have specific parts of maths that you really enjoy? Like for myself, I'd probably say, okay, initially when I was at school, it would have been the pure side. But as I got older, I found us drawn more towards the applied side because again, even though while I love the eureka moments and those moments of like, maths of math's sake, I think I got drawn towards probability, stats, the applied world, how we can understand risk in our world using mathematics. So I think, and again, even now as a not a professional mathematician, because I'm a maths teacher, but I use maths in my walk of life. I find the application of maths something that I almost like. It's not like I'm trying to persuade other people that maths is a point, because I think when you're looking at pure maths problems, you can just throw yourself in it. But I love the application of mathematics. Again, in the past year during COVID, we've seen that again, it's statistics, but the application of maths through stats can be really powerful in making people's lives better. So for me, I've always been drawn as I got older towards the applied side. But have you found what you're more of a pure person?
I think my sort of experience is similar to yours. So at A level and sort of at school, the math that I liked was the pure maths. But in terms of the flavor and the style of it, it's very different to what pure maths is at university. And I still enjoy it, but sort of, so starting university maths in first year, when we first did the first real analysis course, it was very, very different to anything that I'd ever done before. And sort of the introduction of rigorous maths. It's important, obviously, to sort of be able to explain why the things that we just assume are true and seem true are actually true, and to question it, and to properly prove all the things that we were just taught earlier on. But I guess to some extent, it is also interesting to see an application. And it's sort of, you look at it and you go, this is the math that I've been studying, the pure maths, but somehow just sort of invented as problems in an abstract way, somehow have turned out later in the future to apply to things. I guess the main example of that's the number theory, and nowadays it's used in computer cryptography and things like that. But as much as I also enjoy applied maths, some of it seems almost unfulfilling when you're given a theorem without a proof. And there's always a part of you that wants to know why it's true and keep questioning why. So in terms of like modules that I want to take, I think I want to balance out some pure maths, some applied maths. So I enjoy, say, the pure integration stuff that we've been doing in terms of defining integrals, but also I enjoy seeing that then applied in things like probability.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think again, I always think it's trying to find the balance, because when we did maths again at school, at GCSE, at A level, the UKMT stuff, it was the pure stuff that drew me in. But again, at university, pure maths is very different. And that first day of reading analysis, like, well, this is actually different to all the pure modules are done at A level. Do you find like doing maths like really makes your brain think in a way in which, you know, so you don't even read the newspaper or watch the news or have a chat with friends. You have your different part of your brain to be activated. When doing really difficult maths problems, I love the fact that your brain, you know, like if people go to the gym or go for a run, your brain gets really tired. You're like concentrating really hard. I love that feeling of exercising the brain that way.
Yeah, because sometimes it can be exhausting though, trying to understand the hard topics. especially during term time. It's very intense. I do like the sort of element of creativity that there is in maths as well, because although it's seen as sort of very structured and very logical, and the proofs are to make it rigorous, but to sometimes to sort of understand and come up with them in the first place takes a sort of moment of creativity. And it's really interesting that it's sort of on the borderline between almost an arts and a science in the way that maths works. And people would debate whether it was an art or not, but
that's a great discussion about maths being an art or science, because in theory, if it's just numeracy, then it is a pure quantitative, here's the question, here's the answer. But the more you delve into maths, it relies on different people may have different approaches to cracking the same nut, so it becomes more creative. Because people often, I remember when I was applying for maths at university, I had some family friends saying, oh, Bobby, are you doing really difficult, like long division problems and multiplication, like multiplying 7-digit numbers in your head? I'm like, no. In fact, like, it's weird. Do you find, George, that mathematicians are not always necessarily the best at arithmetic? Because people often assume that mathematicians have got the best, like, countdown skills, but that's not always the case. I find it's a different skill set.
I feel almost called out by that. I'm not the best at sort of mental arithmetic. I feel like because I don't practice it as much, the skills in it sort of have gone downhill almost. But the exam papers are non-calculator, but they're written so that all the sums in it are generally easy anyway, because it's sort of, if you put in hard numbers, it's just a question of, can you crunch them in a calculator? I guess with just doing arithmetic, that was more a question of practice, but I always found myself personally, I always make silly mistakes, especially in school I did.
What is it about, like, as a mathematician, like, even though you've been doing maths since the age of 5 and you look through your degree, why do we make silly mistakes? Is the one thing that really frustrates me. Again, as a teacher, it frustrates me, but even as an adult, sometimes if I'm doing a problem helping out one of my A-level students, I might make a mistake when doing it and go, oh, silly mistake. Why do you think that we keep making silly mistakes, even though in theory it's just a process that we can follow?
That's something that's hard to answer. I've never really thought about that. I guess when you're doing sort of harder problems, you tend to sort of skip past thinking actively about those easier steps, which makes it easy to make, say, little algebraic mistakes or numerical mistakes, because you're not really actively engaging your brain in those calculations, and you're more trying to engage it in thinking about the harder parts of the problem. I guess that would be my answer. Do you have an answer to that?
I think it's partly what you're saying, George. I think we put our certain parts of our brain on automatic pilot, because you're obviously using your working memory to work out, let's say, the main body of the problem, and because of that, the automatic pilot part makes an error because it's just sort of just going through the motions. So I think our brains, while they're amazing, our working memory is something that's not really developed over centuries and millennia. We can still only store a small amount of limited information in our heads. Again, most people, no matter how smart you are, maybe 7 to 9 or 7 to 11 digits is all we can store. No matter, whether you're a PhD or a Fields medalist, they're not going to be able to store more than 10 11 digits there. So because of that, our working memory is under stress. So when we're doing something new, I think the automatic pilot starts working, but occasionally the automatic pilot decides to go off in a different direction, and then you only realize later on, like, that's annoying, screw up. So are you someone that will take your paper, throw it in the bin, or you like neatly cross it and look at it later? What's your sort of
I have a pile of screwed up paper next to me, actually. I have a pile of sort of rough working on the floor. Because sort of when I make a mistake, I just sort of start again.
George, have you found like any particular piece of maths or work really that sparked your interest, that really interesting in the last couple of years?
I would probably say the probability. I guess it's the thing that I've been most interested in, and I've enjoyed it the most. I think it's hard to explain why I sort of enjoy different pieces of maths, but it's sort of borderline. Some of it's very proof-based and some of it does have applications. So I think it's in the perfect middle ground. And later on in some of the future probability courses, it does seem to apply some very pure results in maths. So I guess it's sort of part applied, but is close to the pure stuff, which is probably why I enjoy it. Yeah. What about you? What sort of modules did you end up taking throughout your degree?
So I ended up veering more towards the applied side again, probability statistics. So again, even though I say again, my first job after university before I became an education teacher was actually working in financial mathematics and derivatives as a trader at Lehman Brothers. So it's very practical applied mathematics. Even though that was the sort of math that drew me towards the end of my time, strange enough, the thing that I loved the most were things like looking at, let's say, the Riemann hypothesis. What does it mean? What's the prime number? Number theory. And partly because it's a sort of like sexy math that you can talk about, like the Millennium Prize problems and what they mean. Because again, even now, when people talk about mathematics, they talk about, oh, prime numbers are used in underpinning encryption methods for data, and they talk about why people are searching for prime numbers, the importance of it to mathematicians. So even though the applied stuff, the statistics and the probability, probably the things that drew me in the most, something about number theory always drew me back. Even now to this day, when I talk about mathematics, I love number theory. I love prime numbers. I guess because maybe when we were young at school, I found those things really alluring. Like, oh, it's fascinating that you can, any number can be, any number greater than 2 can be built as a product of prime numbers. I found that fascinating. Really, any number, and it's just like it's those things that involve proof, prime numbers. Even to this day, when I try and like tell people about the power of maths, I'm actually drawn more to the number theory side rather than the applied. Although actually the applied stuff is what I probably enjoyed more as a mathematician.
I think the number theory is sort of what first sparked my interest in maths, because numbers are something that we're taught from very, very young. And we just have all these numbers, but there's so many properties about them that we just don't know and seem to be, say the primes seem to be random, but then you have these hypotheses that sort of tell us there's some sort of pattern in them. And it's just sort of really interesting to see that these basic building blocks of how we count have all these things that we still don't know about. So also a lot of the questions in number theory, there are ones that can be understood really easy for sort of primary school and high school children. If you look at things like the Collat's conjecture, and things like that, I remember sitting and just checking it with numbers to see if it worked.
Yeah, I think that's some of the beauty of mathematics. As a teacher, we call, let me get this right, low ceiling, high threshold. So these are tasks where someone in theory in primary school can understand it, but actually to get right to the bottom of it could require post-grad study. So that's what I love about number theory. Whereas with elements of stats, you can't access it if you're 10, 11, 12, some, you're like, what does this mean? You can't. Whereas with number theory, young children can access it, but people devote their whole lives towards it. So it's one of those things where everyone can sort of worship at the table of mathematics, whether you're 5 or 55.
Yeah, and there's also some there are also some results that are sort of surprising that come out of some harder maths. So when we were doing complex analysis and we're learning about contour integrals, and the end of the problem in one of the problem sheets just says sort of prove this sum equals pi squared over 6. And it's these sort of results that you've seen and don't understand, and they don't seem intuitive why it should work. If you take 1 over 1 plus 1 over 4 plus 1 over 9 ... and it converges to a multiple of pi. And it's something you can understand really easily, but to try and understand why it works is really difficult. And it comes out of some hard maths that you have to learn later on.
Yeah. So do you think doing those sort of bits of work has taught you new skills that you didn't have when you were 16, 17, 18?
Yeah, definitely. I found sort of first year of the degree was definitely learning to think differently. And at first it was just learning a new way of thinking, because obviously you have to learn sort of how to write proper proofs, etc. But it's also about thinking very analytically. Whenever you see things, you sort of have to question, what's the definition of this? How are you defining that? And it can sort of be applied anywhere, sort of if you're having a discussion, even in a debate or something, you just have to look at how are you defining everything? What these words actually mean? And as a mathematician, you're very focused on those sort of things. What sort of things do you think you gained from doing a degree in maths?
I think the ability to persist in the subject, because maths is something where the more advanced you get, the answers don't come immediately, and you've got to persist. You've got to maybe speak to people, do some more research, try again, get lots of piece of paper. So like even if I don't use it that high now in my teaching job, I don't use a high level of maths I did before. The sort of persistence and resilience that I developed is still needed very much, because again, I think unless you're sort of a research mathematician, a lot of the actual mathematical skills you don't use on a day-to-day basis anymore, but the elements of having to plow through problems, be resistant, be resilient, also like soft skills, actually they do come into play because you're used to working hard. And again, I'm not going to disrespect other subjects like English or history where they don't have as much lecture time, but in our study when there's a lot of work to get through, and English they've got they read lots of books and literature, but with maths I think that resilience has been really useful in my career as a teacher and educator. So I would say that I think it's just the ability to keep going back and trying again, because a lot of mathematicians will face that. Some people face it when they're really young, 12, 13. Some people face it older. They get to a point where like, I'm getting really stuck. So it's like, how do you respond to that situation? Like, yeah, it's weird how you got to, yeah, it's when your brains are really tired, exhausted. Like, have I had enough, or do I take a break, go for a run around the park, try and get a moment of inspiration?
Yeah, I think everyone sort of feels it at some point where you sort of almost hit a brick wall and you feel like you're not understanding things. But then you sort of have to take time away from it, come back to it, go backwards a bit and ask if you really understood the bits before, and then just try and work your way back. And eventually things tend to click.
That's what we hope. The fingers crossed bit.
Yeah,
Where do you think you'd like your maths to take you, George?
I'm not sure, to be honest, because sort of in careers after university, I'm starting to think about it, but I feel like I really want to pursue something where I'll actually be able to use some of the math that I've learned at my time at university. So it might be in sort of stats or data analysis, it might be cryptography or quantitative finance, or maybe even I haven't ruled out the possibility of sort of continuing in research or academia, but I'm not certain yet. I just know that I really enjoy my maths and I sort of want to be able to keep using it. So what drew you to your career then and made you take that decision?
Yeah, so like I had sort of a career in two parts. Because initially, I worked in financial mathematics as a trader using. Again, it was quite cool using mathematics on a daily basis. Partly intuitive because in the markets there are market forces that can't be governed purely by quantitative analysis, but then also there's parts of financial models which rely on mathematicians, quants to develop. So it involved a lot. But then I changed careers after about 6, 7 years. So I did become a chartered accountant, which is not really mathematical, but it's more numerical. After I taught new graduates at PwC, and I realized actually I really love teaching people, learn new skill. And I thought, what can I teach? Business is cool, it's okay, but I think maths. So I went back to Cambridge, did my teacher training, my master's, and became a maths teacher, which is what I am now part time. I think with maths teaching, it's made me go back and remember what it's like being a student, because obviously as a teacher, I'm like, oh, it's really easy. Of course it's easy. But you need to go back, take a step back and go, the first time I did it, there were certain bits of maths which I struggled a little bit with or a lot with. How do I get someone else to sit in my shoes and understand that? So it's fun because I almost get to see that, that light bulb moment when they get the eureka. As individuals, we get it. And as a teacher, and I'm sure when you've helped other people, younger people or first years, etc., I get that quite frequently in the job. So I really love that about the teaching. Have you had the chance to help people either sixth formers applying for university or first years or as a college parent?
Yeah, I have had to help some people with maths and stuff before. And it is always good to see people sort of understand it. I guess on the subject of math education, an interesting question is you always get that sort of comment when you say you do maths. People always respond with, oh, I was never good at maths when I was in school. And it's a really, really standard comment that you get all the time. And do you think that's a problem with sort of the way math is taught? What do you think causes that to be so standard as a response?
This is a great. It's a great question, George. Again, I have so many times people tell me, "Oh, Bobby, I don't have a maths brain," or "Mr. Seagull at parents' evenings," and I think the problem is in Britain and other countries, Britain in particular, in the West, we often ascribe mathematical success, especially at a young age, to like an innate talent. And of course, there is a varying degree of talent. Some people do have an affinity with numbers, but I think to reach a competence of maths that's needed at school in particular doesn't require like genius. It just needs you to work hard and persist. And again, getting your number skills, your number bonds, your time tables, your fractions, that doesn't require any sort of innate gift of mathematics. But in England and Britain, we often say, children that are good at maths are really bright, really gifted. And of course, some of them are, but I think we need to detach success in maths to giftedness. Of course, the higher level you get, yeah, there are elements of gifts do matter. But at school level, I think we need to change the narrative to actually working hard over a long period of time will get you competence in the subjects. Again, I think in England, 1/3 of students, again, my students as well, will not pass GCSE. So they're people that enter the world of work just being afraid of numbers. That's not because they haven't got the gifts to do maths, but it's because they've had negative experiences. Again, in primary school, George, when teachers mark maths, they put lots of X's. And whereas in English, if you're incorrect, they'll put, George, put more similes. You're like, okay, I'll think of more similes. Whereas if you had lots of bad crosses in maths, you think, I can't do maths. So I think we need to start changing the narrative around not just getting things right, but was your thinking right? Was your process right?
Yeah, I feel like at first sort of early math, it's always right or wrong. And if you get it right first time, you might go, oh, I'm good at this. I'll keep at it. Whereas in other subjects, because I guess I was sort of the other way, because I was always sort of been good at maths and felt less so at other subjects. I've always thought, oh, I like it because there's a right answer. Therefore, I can get it right. And other subjects, there's not so much. But I guess in terms of being good at maths, really is about a skill that you develop. And especially now, it's more about developing these skills over time. And it's not just getting things right or wrong.
It's totally about the more we can get the message out there that it's a skill that you can develop. And of course, while there's a spectrum of ability, it is a skill like anything else. If you stop using your mental arithmetic for a long period of time, you're going into Sainsbury's and doing your shopping, even then, you're like, my mental arithmetic's not quite up there. So yeah, absolutely. Like I said, looking to the future. So obviously now I'm a alumni of the college. What's your view about, so when you're halfway through you're in your second year now, a couple years left, when you do eventually sort of move on from LMH, what do you think your view of LMH will be then?
I think I'll remember it fondly, definitely. Obviously, sort of, I've made lots of very, very close friends from being at university, and I hope to sort of always be in touch with them in the future. I don't know about yourself, are you still in touch with the people that you met at university?
Yeah, a few weddings over the years, a few LMH children. Interesting, like when we left, Facebook started in our first year, so it was just about beginning. The Facebook is the way that we've all kept in touch because this is pre-WhatsApp and all those sort of devices. So we thank Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook for keeping us in touch in the early days. But yeah, I got back involved as a member of the LMHA, so that's the Alumni Association. So it's been a great way of looking at how the college engages with its alumni and how people can still feel involved in the college. Obviously, the reality is when people graduate, they're trying to find their first grad job and settle down in a new city, be it London or Manchester, or Birmingham. So people aren't immediately think of LMH. Once they sort of settle, then they start thinking back, I had a really fun time. In fact, like a lot of people say university is probably the most fun time of their life. Like I remember when I was 18 in my gap year, before I went to LMH, I was at KPMG in the city. And then one of the partners did maths at Oxford. And he said to me, Bobby, enjoy maths, enjoy university. It's the best time of your life. It's downhill after that. I don't quite agree it's downhill, but it's definitely university is an amazing time where you get to devote yourself to something, like whatever your subject is. And for us, it's mathematics. So it's a very special time, actually.
Yeah, people always cynically say that sort of at Oxford, you do your subject so much until you hate it. But I guess there are times where you do sort of feel exhausted, but everyone that you meet has a real passion for their subject. And no matter what subject that is, it's always interesting talking to people who love it.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, now as someone that's an alumni, I love our foundation year in particular. I know it's changing
Yeah,
to like a university-wide scheme. It just makes me proud. I can tell people. Sometimes people have misconceptions of Oxford being a type of place for a particular kind of person from a particular kind of background. But when we talk about the foundation year, and it shows actually Oxford, LMH, we're about getting students are capable, interested, really want to further themselves from all sorts of backgrounds. Actually, makes me very proud to be an LMH alumni.
yeah. At LMH, I think it's always good. There are so many different types of people and people from different backgrounds, but everyone gets along great. And it's just a wonderful community to be a part of. And I do hope that I could sort of stay in contact with LMH into the future.
I'm sure you were like, well, as our motto says, is it souvent me souviens? I think it means remember me often, something along those lines. Yeah, so LMH is, yeah, so definitely I'm very proud of him, and I'm sure you will be too, George. Thank you. It's been a real pleasure chatting to you, George.
Thank you.